Hey guys, question for you. 9mm, is that enough for bear defense? Or do we need something huge like a 454 pistol revolver? Or should we carry something like a Glock 20? Or should we carry a gun that for town and a different gun for woods? Or should we have a Glock 9 for town and a Glock 20 for woods? Or should we just carry a 454 in our pants all the time? So that is going to be what we're going to be discussing in this video. How to think about your handgun selection based on your context. So this is something I want to introduce as a conversation because it's been something I've been thinking about a decent amount recently, and I want to see what other people think about this framework and see what other opinions are out there, and kind of just give me an opportunity to post this so that I can have a rep in developing this frame of thought. So we're going to be talking about a 90-10, a 50-50, and a 10-90 split in concern with your defensive needs with your handgun. So what that is referring to is where if you have your 100% concern of your world of context for a handgun, if 90% or more is concerned with the normal human self-defense needs that you have, and 10% or less is oriented towards dangerous animals, versus a 50-50 split where you are pretty much equally concerned with the risk of a human adversary, a human threat to your life, or a large animal threat to your life. And then with the 10-90, we're flipping that original script where 10% or less of your concern is with a human attack, and 90% or more is really focused on the risk of a bear attack, okay? So this frame of reference is something I have kind of stumbled upon, where it makes it much easier to distinguish the needs you have in your life when selecting a handgun. Now, the merits of a one gun versus two gun solution. Historically, traditionally, I've carried a 9mm in Alaska because I fell into the 90-10 category, where I was 90+% concerned with human threats, but I felt I need to be prepared for the large animal threat. So I would carry some type of expanding ammunition for most of my uses, where I'd carry something like a critical duty or an HST or a gold dot. And then when I go to the woods, I would carry Buffalo Bore Outdoorsman 147 grain plus P hardcast loads. And that felt like a really good solution. And then when I moved out into this area where we are now, where bear have become a larger part of our concern, I simply swapped the roles where my 147 grain hardcast load became my standard carry load, and I have town ammo now. But with the change in area and the change of bear concern, our recreational realities have also changed, where we are now commonly recreating in places where bears are a larger risk to us, and we're recreating in ways where we are increasing our profile of risk. Going to normal established parks and trails is great. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not the way that me and my family enjoy nature. We want to get out into the wilderness and be part of the environment, and that naturally exposes you to more of the environment. And when you're doing that with a young family, where we have a 5-year-old son, an 18-month-old son, and a very pregnant mommy, the buck stops with you and mom to be able to handle the risks of those environments, whether it's moving water or rough terrain or animals. So this 90-10, 50-50, 10-90 framework gives us a way to isolate our risks relative to our context and make decisions. So with that, let's talk about one gun versus two gun solutions. With the one gun solution, like I've just mentioned, I've been historically using the 9mm. 1 second. I'm currently probably going to switch to a Glock 20 because I am now living more in a 50-50 reality. The Glock 20 gives me a very healthy mix of capacity and traditional marksmanship. Not traditional historically, traditional for me. Where all the development I've spent with my 9mm platforms, I can just transition over to the 10 mil, get used to the grip on the 10 mil, returning from recoil to 10 mil. And then I'm just going to transition to that as my standard carry firearm. And I will carry 10 mil both at home and in town. And that will be the gun I carry for the majority of my life. However, we are looking at implementing a 2-gun system. And I want to talk about the merits of using a similar gun versus an insimilar gun, a non-similar gun, for your secondary firearm. Because I have always thought that using a Glock 20 makes a lot of sense if you carry a Glock 17. I am becoming of the opinion that that's probably not the best advice. And the reason is because if you've ever gotten into a car, like if you drive a car to commute and you've gotten into someone else's car, you've probably had the experience where you go to reach for the gear shift to put the car in drive in a place where it is not. And likewise, when you have a handgun, especially a handgun that has a red dot on it, that is very similar in nature, how you carry it, how you interact with it, very similar, but the grip dimensions are very non-similar. Switching from this, your normal carry gun, to your woods carry gun, that is very similar, but just different enough, it seems to me likely that you could have, especially in a panic situation, a opportunity to grab this as if it was a 9mm and get a bad presentation at maybe the worst possible time to have a bad presentation of a handgun. So with that, now you've never gotten onto a lawnmower and and reach for the gear shifter where it wasn't. It's a completely different thing you're using in your brain. It has 4 wheels. You can park it in your driveway right next to your car. It drives a lot like a car, but it's very different. Your brain knows it's different. You've likely never reached for the gear shifter in a place that it wasn't on your lawnmower. So with that same mentality, something like a large revolver, whether be it double action or single action, and we'll talk about that in later videos, it's different, especially if you carry it differently than you carry your normal gun. If you carry this in a shoulder holster, or if you carry this in a chest holster, or in some sort of, well, I won't talk about other options. We'll get into that as things develop. But if you carry this differently than you carry your normal gun, and you're carrying a different gun, substantially different gun, the thought is that your brain can more easily take a second track to this option than it can distinguishing between 2 very similar options. So I'm of the opinion that a substantially different platform for your woods carry gun probably makes a lot of sense. Or with a revolver, if you're going to go revolver centric and carry a revolver daily, you can take this revolver and set it up to mimic your daily carry revolver almost exactly. If you get something like a GP 100, you can probably find a grip that will fit both handguns. The trigger mechanisms are incredibly similar. And you can make this gun and your carry gun feel practically exactly the same. And the way you need to support both guns is exactly the same because the grips are exactly the same. It's just a difference in the recoil profile. So that's another way you could go about the 2-gun system, where your training is able to overlap both systems almost exactly, because you can put the exact same grips on this that you put on your normal carry revolver, and then train on both systems. That might be a good thing as well. We'll explore that later. But yeah, with that, I want to talk about the training costs of these platforms. And I will be doing a video on my introduction to this platform because it has been very interesting. My wife purchased this for our testing and development, both individually and for the business. So she bought this, and she also, praise L, bought a reloading set with it because of what I'm about to show you. So let's come over here real fast. Okay guys, so here we have an assortment of ammunition showing 5.56, 454 Casull, 10mm, and 9mm. And you'll notice there's a variance in how much of the ammunition is laid out.
I don't want to talk exact numbers on YouTube, just to not freak out the YouTube AI or whatever, which I get, but I wanted to give a visual reference for how much this ammunition costs, at least for me here in Alaska. Okay, so that 454 round is equivalent cost to 9 or 10 rounds of 5.56 to the left, to 9 or 10 rounds of 10 millimeter to the right, or 18 rounds of 9 millimeter to the far right. One round of 454 Casull can give you, is the same cost as an entire magazine of 9 millimeter. A full cylinder of 454, 6 rounds, is equivalent to 6 magazines of 9 millimeter. A full cylinder of 454 is equivalent to 2 magazines of 5.56. So for that single cylinder load of 454 Casull, you could get 2 full magazines of 5.56. That full cylinder of 454 can give you whatever 9 times 6 is. So 9 times 6. No, I'm sorry. So 54 rounds of 10 mil. My goodness gracious. Sorry, guys. Still waking up. So, but think about that. So that single round of 454 is of equivalent cost to that amount of those ammunitions. That is a substantial financial burden, especially when you consider how different revolvers are to shoot well compared to semi-autos. That's something we're going to explore in another video. But likewise, if we look at 10 millimeter and 9 millimeter, this demonstrates how much more expensive 10 mil is to 9 mil. It's roughly twice the cost, looking comparatively at like for like ammunition, training level 9 mil versus training level 10 mil. So if you have an ammo budget that can sustain 1,000 rounds of 9 millimeter a month, then you're looking at about 500 rounds of 10 mil. Now, of course, you can increase your rate of dry fire. That's all good. That's excellent. So there is a cost to terminal performance. This stuff is not free. You don't get 1,300 foot-pounds of energy in a handgun and get to also have the same economy of scale as something like 9 millimeter. It's just not how it works. However, I do want to talk about flexibility with the 10 mil. A problem I've had with 9 millimeter a lot is where I will have carried my 9 millimeter Buffalo bore ammo for a year. I go to switch it and I can't find it. That issue will go away once our company starts stocking Buffalo bore ammunition. But at the moment, you have to find a very specific round to make 9 millimeter adequate for Wood's defense. Now, your range ammo for 10 millimeter is not perfect, but it is substantially better innately just by what it is as an option. If you're finding yourself in a financial or supply pinch where finding ammunition for your gun is a problem, right? So there is that. You have a lot of flexibility with the 10 millimeter that the 9 millimeter just simply doesn't give you. This FMJ 9 mil is not something I would want to carry in the woods. And even something like a flat nose, a rounded flat nose FMJ with 9, it's such a light bullet. It's such a slow bullet. It just doesn't give me confidence that it can do what it needs to do to be effective on something like a grizzly bear. Where with a 10 mil, if your range ammo is of a profile that is adequate, where you have a flat med plat, and the bullet is heavy enough and going fast enough to be effective enough to at least get to where it needs to go reliably, it can give you an option in a pinch that is much more practical than a full metal jacket 9 mil. I'm not recommending full metal jacket 10 mil for woods carry, but I am saying in a pinch, I'm much more comfortable carrying that than I am carrying that in a pinch in the woods. So I wanted to give you guys this kind of demonstration to show what you're looking at in cost with something with like a big bore revolver versus 10 mil versus 9 mil.
Okay. So with that, why on earth would you not just carry the 10 mil, right? And I'm going to explore this concept in a video on its own. But if you look at this as just a big handgun, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You're giving up the capacity. You're getting a new system for a terminal performance gain. That is substantial, but is it so substantial as to mitigate the benefit of just sticking with something like a Glock 20? Looking at it as a handgun compared to handguns, I don't think so. But if you look at it for what it actually is terminally and what it can actually do, especially with 454 Casull, I think looking at it as a handgun is probably not the right way to think of it. Now, if you look at this as an extremely compact rifle that happens to be in handgun form, that can be carried like a handgun, is half or even less the weight of a rifle, but still gives you rifle-esque performance with 6 whole rounds of capacity and something that can fit in your single hand. Thinking of this as the world's most compact rifle is how I'm thinking of it. Now, with that, a rifle can give you extended range performance. Can this? Yeah. If you can learn to shoot this gun well, this is a 200 meter handgun. Now, I'm not saying it's an ethical hunting tool at 200 meters, but I'm feeling mighty confident that this gun is going to be something that is quite easily used out to 200 meters. At 15, 25 meters, shooting this thing is a breeze. Shooting this thing accurately, shooting it accurately is a different conversation. Shooting it precisely is a breeze. Shooting it accurately is going to is going to require development on my part. Something we'll talk about in another video. Because shooting revolvers well is not, you need to do different things than you need to do with a semi-auto. I've learned this the hard way after expending quite a bit of a very expensive 454 ammunition and zeroing a very good zero, which isn't the right word, but for the sake of simplicity, I zeroed this revolver perfectly to my imperfect shooting, which is unfortunate. But I did learn from that, and I'll get to share that with you guys as we go. But the reason that you might choose something like a big revolver, especially and namely a 454 or something like a 460 Smith & Wesson, and the line balls, the 475 line ball, the 500 line balls, they're awesome as far as like a stopping handgun, compared to like a stopping rifle, but in handgun form. But they don't give you that extended range performance that the 454 or especially the 460 Smith can give you. So that is something we'll be exploring in future content. But this gives me a perfect tool to have a convenient, small, lightweight, relative to a light rifle, handgun that also gives me a lot of what I want out of a rifle without having to do with a rifle. And it gives it to me in a system. One second, that's cool. There's a helicopter. Sorry, here locally we have a very active aviation community, and we have some neighbors that do some very, very cool things. And so seeing Blackhawks go over the house is fairly normal, but it's always cool. Anyway, I don't know how you end up with Blackhawks coming to your house, but I want part of it. Anyway, so looking at this as a microscopic stopping rifle is what is making the very expensive 454 ammunition make sense to me personally. You are getting a 360 grain bullet going 1,300 feet per second for this ammo and that revolver. That's stupid. That is 3 times the weight of my 9mm, right? Or nearly 3 times the weight of my 9mm, going 200 feet per second faster. Okay, I like that. As far as the double action versus single action, that's something we're gonna need to talk about. But when you're dealing with the recoil of this platform, it is substantial.
Okay. Alright. About where I expected it to be. So, I don't know. Probably call it fine.
Yep.
And when you are getting your CNS physically shocked every time you shoot, coming back on the hammer is not going to slow you down. And it's the one issue is if you are like physically under a bear and you need to shove this thing up into a bear and then start emptying your cylinder into the bear, perhaps there's a major benefit to that double action trigger in that specific scenario. But in all other scenarios, simply coming over the top of this thing and doing that is not going to meaningfully slow you down. And you can get more accurate revolvers if that 200-meter capacity is interesting or important to you, which for me it is, and exploring single action revolvers will be something we probably do in the future, which is hilarious because if you don't know this about me, I started carrying with a single action revolver. It was a 1860, I believe it was an 1860 Colt Navy in 36 caliber. That was with a 6 or 7 inch barrel. That was my first carry handgun. Yeah, so the idea of going back to single action is just hilarious. But it is something we're considering, which I find fascinating. So I wanted to bring this to you guys. I want to see what you guys have to say or have to think. I will make a mention that reloading can make this a much more affordable process. I would not try to necessarily reload your woods ammo unless you have the ability to cast your own bullets. Finding these bullets is pretty tricky, but what you can do is use the bullets that are on the market, get a 300 grain XTP or similar, and then load that to mimic safely at your own risk, all the normal stuff, but load that 300 grain projectile to mimic something like the Buffalo Bore monometal, which is a 300 grain projectile. So if you can chronograph that monometal bullet, see where you're at as far as velocity is concerned, and then build your reloads to mimic that that recoil impulse, and then verify that the recoil impulse matches on paper between where these rounds land and where your hand loads land. If you can do that, you can make the cost of the 454 much more manageable, and I would have no problem carrying the non-Magnum XTP bullet for personal defense as far as against humans is concerned. If you need to push this revolver into a normal self-defense role, 6 rounds of XTP, 300 grain XTPs going, I don't know, 13, 14, 1500 feet per second. That at that level of velocity, the expansion is going to be so violent, you're unlikely to see the significant overpenetration you would see using something like a hard cast solid, right? So just what I'm thinking about right now, and wanted to get it out to you guys. I'll be making videos on this platform as a whole as well. But yeah, just let me know what you guys think. Love you guys. Shalom.